Well, hey there, and welcome to Board to Learn, the channel dedicated to helping you learn how to play your new games faster. My name is Kent, and today we're looking at Dinosaur Island. And right, a fun roll and write game for 1 to 4 players. So meet me at the table, and we'll get started. In Dinosaur Island Roar and Write, your goal is to build the best dinosaur park possible. Throughout the game, you will collect DNA to create dinosaurs, hire specialists with unique abilities, and build attractions and other buildings to improve your park. But dinosaurs are dangerous, and if you become too ambitious without providing enough security, visitors can get injured or even eaten. As you play, everything will be tracked on your park sheets as you build out your park, manage resources, and record your progress. At the end of the game, players will total their points, and the player with the highest score wins. To set up, start by placing the game board in the middle of the table, making sure to use the correct side for your player count. Then, prepare the building and specialist cards. If this is your first time playing the game, I recommend removing any cards that show this icon here. This is the expert symbol meant for players who are already familiar with the game. Once the expert cards are removed, shuffle the blue building cards. Then draw 3 cards and place them face up on the left side of the board in slots A, B, and C. Then do the same with the orange specialist cards, placing them face up on the right side of the board. Take the pink cube, also known as the season marker, and place it to the right of the number 1 on the top of the board. Next, place all 10 dice into the dice bag, and set the bag to the side for now. For player setup, give each player 2 park sheets and a pencil. Place one sheet so you can see the park grid here. The other should show the park management tracker here. All players will start with 3 basic DNA. Circle the first box on the yellow, red, and blue DNA tracks here. To the right of the DNA tracker is the blue building track. You will see spots A, B, and C with 10 coins next to each letter. Look at the cost shown in the upper right corner of each building card on the table. On your player sheet, fill in coins so the remaining unfilled coins match the cost of the building. For example, the casino in slot A costs 6 coins, so I would fill in the last 4 coins on track A. Once finished with the buildings, move on to the specialist. On the second park sheet, in the orange section on the far right under the beaker icon, are the tracks for the 3 specialists. Just like the buildings, fill in coins so the remaining unfilled coins match the cost shown on specialist cards A, B, and C. Now choose the first player. The game suggests the first person to come up with a punny dinosaur joke, or you can simply choose a player at random. Give that player the first player marker. To balance turn order, players after the first receive additional DNA. Going clockwise from the first player, the second player gains 1 green DNA, the third player gains 1 green and 1 purple DNA, the fourth player gains 1 green, 1 purple, and 1 orange DNA. Circle the first box of each matching DNA track. And with that, the setup is complete. Dinosaur Island Roar and Write is played over 3 seasons, and each season is broken into 3 different phases. During the first 2 phases, players will draft dice and collect their resources, then take turns placing those dice onto the board to perform actions and improve their park. After the first phase is complete, players will draft a new set of dice and repeat the process for the second phase. Then, players will move into the Run the Park phase. During this phase, all players will simultaneously open their parks to visitors, gain income, use specialist abilities, and check to see if their park is secure enough to avoid any accidents. Let's break down each phase, starting with drafting and placing. Just like it sounds, there are 2 parts to this phase. To start, the first player will draw dice from the bag based on the player count. You will draw 2 dice per player plus 1 additional dice, or refer to the chart here. Roll all of the dice and place them into the center of the table. I personally like using a dice tray for this, but if you do not have one, the game box lid works great as well. Starting with the first player and moving clockwise, each player will draft 1 die. Once you reach the last player, instead of the draft continuing around the table, that player immediately drafts a second die. The draft order then reverses direction and continues counterclockwise back to the first player, until all players have drafted 2 dice total. Once all players have chosen their dice, there will be 1 die remaining in the tray. All players will collect the resources shown on the 2 dice they drafted. Then, all players will also gain the resources from the remaining die in the tray. However, players must also gain any threat icons shown on that leftover die. Now, let's take a look at the different icons you may find on the dice and how they are added to your player sheets. The back of the rulebook also contains a great icon reference guide. Since there are no player aids included, you may want to keep the rulebook nearby during the first few games. The most common icons you will see are DNA. There are 2 types of DNA in the game. Basic DNA includes yellow, blue, and red. Advanced DNA includes green, purple, and orange. DNA is used to create dinosaurs. There are 3 different dinosaur categories in the game: herbivores, small carnivores, and large carnivores. Basic DNA is used to create herbivores and also help create small carnivores. Advanced DNA is used to complete small carnivores and create large carnivores. Whenever you gain DNA, draw a circle in the next available box of that DNA type on your player sheet. If a DNA track is ever completely filled and you would gain additional DNA of that type, you instead gain coins for each extra DNA received. You may also see these wild DNA icons throughout the game. These are considered either wild basic DNA or wild advanced DNA and allow you to choose any one DNA type from that matching group. Coins are used to hire specialists or purchase blue buildings. You may store up to 5 coins on your player sheet here. Once all 5 spaces are filled, any additional coins must immediately be spent toward hiring a specialist or purchasing a building. Otherwise, those extra coins are lost. When you complete a blue building or specialist, immediately gain its bonus marked with this symbol. It does not matter which phase of the game you are currently in. If you complete it, you gain the bonus right away. Blue buildings will also provide in-game points and can be visited during tours just like other buildings. Most buildings may be rotated and flipped when placed into your park, though some have additional placement restrictions shown on the card itself. You must be able to place a building in your park at the time of purchase to qualify for its bonus and in-game points. Specialists provide an immediate bonus when hired and will also grant additional benefits during the Run the Park phase. We will discuss those abilities later in the video. Road icons are used to build roads within your park. Like coins, you may store up to 5 roads here for later use. Once all 5 spaces are filled, any additional roads must immediately be placed into your park, or they are lost. I will explain road placement in more detail later in the video. Security icons allow you to circle the next available space on your security tracker, next to your park here. You will also notice red threat icons on some dice as well as on carnivores. Whenever you gain a threat, put a dot in the first available space on the security tracker. I will explain how threats and security work in more detail during the Run the Park phase. The final icons found on the dice are the attraction buildings. There are 3 different attractions that can be added to your park: the yellow merch building, the white ride building, and red food building. These can also be found in the attractions section of your player sheet. Whenever you gain one of these attractions, first fill in the next available circle on the attraction type. Then immediately place that building somewhere into your park. Buildings may be rotated or flipped however you like. The only restriction is that buildings cannot touch any part of another building, which includes diagonally at the corners. Your HQ is also considered a building. However, the outer walls of your park and the 6 exits are not considered buildings. And lastly, if you're looking at a die and there's a slash between the resources, choose one of those resources to gain. Now that we understand the dice and how to draft them, it's time to move on to the second part of this phase. Place dice on the game board. Starting with the first player and moving clockwise, players will choose one of their dice, place it on the location on the game board, then take the action of that location. It is important that you do not change the face of the dice after it has been drafted. The threat icons on the dice become important during this step, but we'll come back to those in just a moment. Let's take a look at each location on the game board, starting with Make Dinos. At this location, you may create up to 4 dinosaurs if you have the required DNA. The available dinosaurs are found below the DNA tracks on your player sheet. There are 3 categories of dinosaurs: herbivores, small carnivores, and large carnivores. The first thing to look at is the hexagon. The hexagon represents the paddock for that dinosaur category. You will see the green leaf for herbivores, the purple footprints for small carnivores, and the orange footprint for large carnivores. Next to each hexagon is the size and shape of that paddock that will be placed into your park. Below each hexagon are the 3 dinosaur species available within that category. Each species is represented by a small circle with that same icon and color as its category. Next to that is the dinosaur's name. Below the name are 4 circles representing the 4 dinosaurs of that species that can be created during the game. To the right, you will find the DNA cost required to create that dinosaur, followed by any threat it generates, the excitement it provides, and finally the endgame points it is worth. To create a dinosaur, first make sure you have the required DNA. Then cross off that DNA from your DNA tracker. Next, fill in one of the circles for the dinosaur you are creating. Then mark any threat that dinosaur generates by placing a dot in the next available square of the security tracker. After that, mark any excitement it generates on the excitement track. I like to circle the bonus icons and draw a line through the numbered spaces, but use whatever method works best for you. Finally, draw the matching paddock somewhere in your park. Then look at the dinosaur species you are creating. You will see one letter that matches the color of that species. Write the letter in the newly created paddock in your park. You only draw a paddock the first time you create a dinosaur of that species. Any future dinosaurs of that same species are added to the existing paddock. Remember that paddocks are considered buildings. Buildings cannot touch other buildings, including your HQ. However, they may touch the outer walls of your park and any exits. When taking this action, you may create up to 4 dinosaurs. The only restrictions are your available DNA and the limit of 4 dinosaurs of each species. The next location on the board is Raise Funds. When taking this action, choose one of the 2 options. You may either gain 2 coins or gain 2 security. Remember, coins are used to hire specialists and purchase the blue building cards. You can store up to 5 coins on your player sheet to spend later. However, once all 5 spaces are filled, any additional coins must be spent immediately or they are lost. Hiring specialists early can be very helpful. They provide immediate bonuses and will grant additional benefits throughout the game. Coins can also be spent at any time using the conversion chart at the bottom of the board. You may spend 2 coins to gain either 1 advanced DNA, 1 road, or 1 security. If you choose the security option, fill in the next 2 available security spaces on your security tracker. Having enough security will be important when running tours later in the game. Next is Extract DNA. When taking this action, choose either 2 basic DNA of your choice or 1 advanced DNA of your choice. The next action space is Duplicate. There is one restriction here. You may not place a die on this space if that die shows an attraction icon. Otherwise, when you place a die here, you gain the resources shown on that die 2 additional times, and all other players gain those resources 1 time. If a die shows a choice between 2 resources, you may choose either resource each time it is gained. This means you may take the same resource twice or choose one of each. The final action space is Build. When taking this action, choose one of the 2 options. You may either build 3 roads or build 1 attraction. Roads are important because they connect the buildings in your park. Since buildings cannot touch each other, roads are how visitors travel between them during tours. To place a road, draw 2 parallel lines inside a square, hopefully connecting buildings within your park. Roads may connect across multiple spaces and may curve within a square. However, roads cannot run directly alongside a building wall, and they cannot cross other roads. Once placed, roads cannot be moved later. If you are not ready to place roads immediately, you may store up to 5 roads on your player's sheet. However, once all 5 storage spaces are filled, any additional roads must be placed immediately or they are lost. Instead of building roads, you may build an attraction. There are 3 attraction types available: merch, ride, and food. Choose 1 attraction, fill in the next available circle for that attraction type, then draw the matching building somewhere in your park. Attractions may be flipped and rotated however you like, and must still follow all normal building placement rules. They also must be connected by roads if visitors are going to reach them during a tour. Those are the 5 action spaces available on the board. Play continues clockwise until all players have placed both of their dice. If a location already contains a die when it's your turn, you may still choose that action. First, look at the die currently at the location you want to use. If that die shows any threat icons, add those threats to your security tracker by placing dots in the next available squares. Then, place your die on the top of the stack and take the action as normal. There is no limit to how many dice can be stacked on a location. Only look at the top die when determining threats. Once all players have placed both of their dice, collect all dice from the board, including the remaining die from the tray, and return them to the bag. Pass the first player marker clockwise to the next player, and move the season marker to the next phase. The new first player will once again draw and roll the dice. Players will draft dice exactly as before, and gain their resources. Remember to gain the resource also from the one remaining die, as well as its threat. Then take turns placing the drafted dice onto the board and taking actions. Once all players have completed their second phase of actions, it is time to move on to the Run the Park phase. Clean up all of the dice by returning them to the bag, then move the season marker to the Run the Park phase. At this point, the first player marker does not change. The Run the Park phase is performed simultaneously by all players. Look at your second player sheet. Along the left side, you will find the 5 steps of this phase. Starting at the top is attractions. For every merch attraction in your park, draw one random die from the bag and roll it. Gain the results shown on the die as though you have drafted it. However, you do not gain any threats from these dice. Once resolved, return the die to the bag. Repeat this process for each merch attraction in your park. Next are ride attractions. For each ride attraction in your park, mark one space on the excitement track. Then resolve food attractions. Gain 1 coin for each food attraction in your park. You may save the coin if you have available storage, otherwise it must be spent immediately. You may resolve your attractions in any order. However, once you move on to the next step, you may not return and resolve additional attraction abilities. This rule applies to all remaining steps of the Run the Park phase as well. The next step is Specialist. For each Specialist you have hired, resolve its Run the Park ability. These may also be resolved in any order. Once all Specialists have been resolved, move on to the Dino Tour. Every tour begins at the HQ and follows connected roads through your park. You may continue visiting connected buildings until you choose to end the tour at either a building or one of the exit gates. As you run your tour, place an X in each new building you visit. And if you ended your tour at an exit gate, circle the gate where you ended your tour. For each new X added during the tour, mark one space on the excitement track. There are a few important rules to remember while running a tour. Buildings include attractions, paddocks, and blue building cards. All buildings must be connected by roads, including your HQ. You may never backtrack during a tour. This means you may not use the same building or road more than once during a single tour. Once your tour is complete and you have gained any excitement, move on to the excitement step. Gain all bonus resources from spaces you have circled on the excitement track. Gaining coins may allow you to complete a blue building or hire a specialist. If this happens, immediately gain any instant bonuses provided by that building or specialist. If those bonuses cause you to circle additional spaces on the excitement track, immediately gain those bonuses as well, before continuing. After resolving all excitement bonuses, move on to the dreaded death toll step. Look at your security tracker. For every uncircled threat, mark one death on the death tracker. If you cross off an exclamation mark while marking deaths, a disaster has occurred. To the right of the death tracker is the disaster chart. For each exclamation mark crossed off, choose one disaster and fill in the corresponding circle. Then immediately resolve its effect. If you choose Destroy a Paddock, select one paddock in your park and fill it in completely. Cross off any dinosaurs currently living in that paddock. You do not lose the excitement or threat those dinosaurs generated, but they will no longer score points at the end of the game. The destroyed space can no longer be used. However, because it is now filled in, future buildings may be placed adjacent to it. If you still have available circles for that dinosaur species, you may build a new paddock for them later in the game. If you choose roads, cross off 3 roads from either in your park or road storage. Those spaces can no longer be used. If you choose an attraction, fill in that attraction in your park and cross it off on your player sheet. If you choose a specialist, cross off that specialist. Its abilities can no longer be used, and it will not score points at the end of the game. If you choose DNA, select 4 DNA that you have collected but not yet spent, and cross them off. With any of these choices, you must have the required item available to lose in order to choose that disaster. Once all players have completed the death toll step, the Run the Park phase is complete. Move the season marker to the next season. At this time, pass the first player marker to the player on the left. And that's the flow of a season. Draft dice, place those dice to improve your park. Do this twice. Then, open your park to visitors during the Run the Park phase. Throughout the game, you will be balancing several competing priorities. You need DNA to create dinosaurs, roads to connect your park, attractions and buildings to improve your tours, and enough security to keep all those dinosaurs under control. After the third season has been completed, the game ends and players move on to the final scoring. On the bottom of your second player sheet is the final scoring section. Start by scoring 2 points for each herbivore, 3 points for each small carnivore, and 5 points for each large carnivore in your park. Then score 3 points for every specialist you have hired. This includes both the specialist on your player sheet and any specialist cards you completed. Score points for any blue buildings you have completed. Look at the circled gates in your park and score their points. Then, looking at your excitement track, score points for the furthest row that you reached. The points for each row are found to the right. Score 1 point for each excitement you gained above 60 on the track. Then, look at your leftover DNA. Score 1 point for every 2 left over. And finally, subtract 1 point for every death that happened at your park. If you went above 20, subtract 2 points for every 1 death above 20. Add up your totals. The player with the most points has run the most successful dino park and wins the game. If there's a tie, the tied player who created the most dinos takes the victory. And that's how to play Dinosaur Island, Rawr and Right. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing to learn more great games. Turn the bell on to be notified of my latest videos. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to respond. And remember, it's not just how you play, it's how much fun you have. I'll see you next time on Board to Learn. Open your park to visitors during the Run the Phase park. Open your park to visitors during the Run the Phase. Open your park to visitors during the Run the Phase.